I'm going to call a smaller crowd. But...
Stand in
Yeah,
front of
gotta
the
stand in
camera.
front of the camera.
Oh, okay.
We're recording.
We're live.
We are live. Okay. Well, are we like on the internet?
We're live.
Oh my goodness.
We're out in the world.
So anyway, too bad for all of you out there that you aren't here, because it's a wonderful place with wonderful people, and we are having a wonderful time. But anyway, we're getting ready to learn about nature's resilience, and I asked a year, maybe two, maybe even 3 years ago, I started talking about, and I don't know if y'all picked up on this and that's why you did it, or if y'all just did it, but started pushing the idea, because I had experienced in one of the, we didn't have a direct hit, but one of the near brushes with a hurricane, how I'd gone outside during the storm, and we were having 35 to maybe 70 mile an hour winds. And you can see these big winds coming when you have a big gust. And I could see one coming. And it was out in my yard, and I stepped behind a clump of alfalfa car. And when it got there, it's like there was no wind at all. And I said, my God, I knew that bamboo could provide some protection, but I had no idea. And then Mike Reshorn told us when we were prepping for the National, or actually the year before that, is that there's a distinct difference between a solid wall. You build a brick wall, right, and there's a 100-mile-an-hour wind going across it. Well, the winds they like a wave, they go right over the wall, and within just a few feet, you've got strong winds again.
Right.
They go just like this.
Right.
But if you have a tree, bamboo, or anything that kind of acts like a sieve more than a complete blockade, the winds go up, and it takes a long time, 7 times the height, according to Mike, before they get down and are as effective as in front of the structure. So with those ideas in mind, I had asked Mike to speak on that at National, and he touched on it, but that wasn't the focus of his talk. And these guys kind of picked up on it somehow with their brilliance and intuitive skills, and put together what looks like a really cool program. And so without any further ado, Shanti Pierce, Dain Sansome, and Hunter Vickers will, aren't you part of this?
Yes.
Yeah. Just that you're not standing up here. That's still the thing.
He's on the couch.
So anyway, thank y'all for doing that. And I kind of hope to use this to promote bamboo, but more importantly, here in South Louisiana, and probably in Florida too, and the rest of the country.
So we just started.
Homeowners insurance is getting downright unaffordable.
Yep.
And so we have to do things to harden our own living spaces and protect our property. And bamboo is the cheapest, best, and I think best,
Most effective.
and most effective quick solution to that. So let's hear it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, it's cheap, it's good, and when it falls, it generally falls gently. You know, it doesn't come crashing down and usually come right through like trees do. Bamboo, still a good idea to watch your heads, like when we were in the grove yesterday, because you don't want to get clogged, but lots of times they'll just lean. I mean, upwards, like when you snap a bamboo, it doesn't just snap like an old dead branch. It sort of frays and gives out.
yeah, so we're going to walk through this a little, strategically, but basically, I don't think it's shocking to anybody to understand that we are going through changes in climate and situations that we're dealing with that are more extreme than maybe what we've dealt with before, right? So these are things that are going to be ongoing and more frequent and more prevalent. So how do we use the resources that we have to protect the things that we have and also do things smarter, right? How do we work smarter? So we're going to talk a little bit, so we're talking about storms. We're specifically focused on storms, Dain, the three of us. And So we're talking about how can we utilize nature in the way that nature utilizes itself to protect itself. I mean, part of hurricanes and storms is about editing, and it's about, you know, we've been talking about this. We have a lot of people in our group this weekend who are kind of in that progression of like 30 years or even further here down the road, where we talk about taking things out and editing due to, you know, wanting different species.
It's part of the rejuvenation process.
Right.
Is it always gives you a chance. It forces you to rethink your farm.
But it is also about building soil, right? That is how nature builds soils, through editing. So
Puts
we have
things
this
down.
idea of like, oh, once a tree in place, we want it there forever and ever. But that's not how nature works. It is cyclical in succession. So can we go to the next slide? Do you have it or do we have it?
Oh, okay. There.
Okay, and so the first thing we're going to focus on are kind of three things that when I think about when it comes to damage from storms. We have water, we have wind, and we have erosion. So water and wind are the two main focused ones as far as like a hurricane. We have lots of water and lots of wind, right? And that comes in all different categories. And then erosion also, because like when I lived in Costa Rica, we deal with a lot of erosion, and mostly it's due to water or erosion. You know, mostly that's how it happens. But erosion in places that have really big inclines like that, tropical areas, Puerto Rico, things like that, they have to think about this in advance, or really should be thinking about this in advance. And it's another place where bamboos do really, really well.
Yeah, water, wind, erosion, as in terms of the weather events.
We're going to yours next.
Yeah. Let's go to.
Can we see what you wrote about water? Wind,
Yeah. So the
maybe
underwater. Yep. Here we go. Older bamboos not only tolerate being underwater for extended periods of time, they also have the ability to adjust their uptake of water, thus moving large amounts of standing water in short periods of time. Now, not all bamboos are equally flood tolerant.
When you're talking about older bamboos, you mean how are you defining older bamboos?
Established bamboos with strong, large root systems.
Okay, right.
So
it's not an aquatic plant. You know, a lot of people mistake bamboo being a ditch.
Heteroplasm.
So let's talk about a couple
weed.
of different varieties.
And so I get, you know, we all get the questions from time to time, you know, where can I plant bamboo on my property? You know, every Saturday, for instance, when we open up our nursery, we get newbies and old hands alike, and people are like, can I plant it? So I'll ask them a number of questions about their soil. Where I live is valley bottom. It's generally very flat, and we get standing water from times. But there are some places in town where they'll get water standing 12 inches deep for many months. And those places, you know, you need to heap up the soil, make a mound, and the bamboos will do much better. I've had experience with 5-axe and Hannon and incense bamboo in wet areas where they'd be flooded, and I think the 5-axe does best.
For how long?
Again, the floods have been like a week or two, but that's a lot. In my book, that's too much water on the ground too long if your bamboo is under the water. Now, if you built it up where it's on a little dam or berm or a slope, that's ideal. Yeah. So water is a big, huge factor in all of this, because it will loosen the soil underneath the bamboo, making it susceptible to the other things.
To the failure. So subtropical and tropicals have much more ability to tread water because that's what they're used to. So for instance, like in a hurricane, not this one, but 2 times back, there was a Ventricosa, 30-year-old Ventricosa, but it sat under 7 feet of water for 3 weeks that I saw, because I kept driving past it going, wow. And it didn't even defoliate. Like it turned a little yellow at some point, and then it went into spring after that and ended up refoliating. But like the tropicals, a lot of the tropicals can really withstand water for a period of time. And oftentimes, like in where we live and in Florida, we'll pull the tropicals up in the summer if we're digging, and there's water sitting right underneath the root system. So they're much more resilient.
Yeah, and with the temperates, I'll add sweet shoot bamboo, the dulces, to that group of ones that I planted in my folks' back pasture, which has a tendency to flood at the end. The Hannon did the worst. Its leaves eventually, I would say after about a week, started to turn orange, and the plants just they shed all their leaves, and then they start to die from obvious suffocation. Yeah. Anytime you can get it up, if you have known wet conditions, building up an area, for lots of reasons. Bamboos love disturbed soil.
Those guys in Oregon who were doing the wastewater treatment, they were using incense bamboo to go in?
Yes, that was Bamboo Garden. Did a big incense bamboo experiment. I think they were gravel beds.
Yeah.
But wastewater filtering
They showed
through
those
gravel.
tanks. Do you guys remember? They showed those tanks full of wastewater, and the roots were growing into
Weren't they gigantic, like concrete basins?
basins. Yeah.
I remember when we went, when the National was in Savannah, once going to this place, there were these two identical clumps of bamboo, one which had been irrigated with gray water, and the other with regular water. And the gray water was significantly bigger.
Oh yeah.
Question. I'm remembering, help me out, that there's a super species or subspecies of the heteroclads that have the air channels in the rhizome.
So all of the temperate bamboo called Phyllostegus heteroclada. There's heteroclada straight. There's heteroclada. There's the Congesta, also there's Atrivegeta, incense bamboo, and then there's Nidularia, the big known bamboo. And these three all exhibit when a cross-section of a rhizome, you'll see these cool little air channels all around the skin of the rhizome. Just within the outside ring, it's really kind of cool. Now, whether that really is an adaptation for breathing, I really don't know, because I've seen some on the edges of ponds, and I honestly can't say they're really that much more tolerant of water than some other species. But it's a really cool theory. And it's a very cool form, which definitely has a function. Really might just be that.
We haven't really truly discovered the function.
No, rice paddies. Rice paddies, they're well studied. The rice is a hollow stalk, and it does act as a snorkel. Sure. It also creates like methane emissions or something like that.
Sure, but as far as the bamboos, we really don't.
I don't think it's ever been thoroughly studied. It's been well conjectured and well discussed, and that's great.
Yeah.
And of course, because it's natural, it has a function.
It
looks like
there's nothing to say to predispose those bamboos as a choice.
From what I've seen around our part of Oregon, where it's planted next to ponds and things like that, I've seen the rhizomes dive into the water a little bit, but I can't say that bamboo is doing better than some that were on the upland. Okay. But it's, as I said, it's sure a cool structure to see those in cross section. Yeah. I probably have a picture. I didn't put it on the presentation here.
Wind is the next.
The other thing is that there have been studies done on bamboo's ability to regulate their uptake of water, which is really cool. That's really cool, because that is like a superpower. Like with the standing water here in Louisiana and Florida and Oregon, we get a lot of this standing water. And bamboos, especially mature bamboos, ability to they just start to transpire, and they pump that water up as fast as they possibly can. So they can self-regulate depending on how much standing water.
Have you seen any reactions different between freshwater? You've been talking about flooding. Is it largely freshwater? What's the experience in terms of flooding with saltwater?
Saltwater, I don't have experience with flooding with saltwater. I mean, I've read some studies on the ability of silica to, help plants regulate saltwater and be more resilient, but I've never found bamboos to be at all tolerant of salt.
Experience of hearing about a bamboo that was saltwater tolerant is somewhere in Mexico, supposedly, there was a stand on the Gulf Coast. And, but whether it was true bamboo or whether it was roseau cane,
Right.
I'm sure it's not seawater, but more a brackish situation.
Right. Brackish is fine. I mean, and really when we're, oh, and that there's a difference between soil and air, right? Like the aerial spray, like on the coastlines of Florida, people usually like, oh, we plant sea breeze because it's tolerant. It's resilient of a bamboo, but it's not tolerant of salt water, and so there's a difference. Yeah.
Flooding is a big issue, but I think the saltwater floods are like tsunamis. In Japan, they'll get a flood comes over all the farm fields, and of course there's bamboo right on the edges of the farm fields or on the dikes between the paddies, and so everything gets flooded with salt water. And from the farmers I've talked to, you'll have about a 2-year sort of fallow period where you can't really grow your crop because the field is so salty, but it washes away with the rainstorms and everything, and then the field grows as normal. It's probably rejuvenated and, supercharged by the seawater. The bamboo, you see a lot of bambusoides and moso in these areas, and it doesn't seem to be that strongly affected from it. But yeah, salt spray is pretty serious.
There are some places in
Yeah.
South Florida that definitely had, flooding, and that's my next question is to ask them.
Should we go on
Yeah,
talk
go
about
ahead.
wind?
When? Yeah.
Smaller bamboos tend to be better than larger bamboos against the wind. And we were talking about windscreen and the ways that currents eddy or get filtered through the screen. Tropicals like fernleaf, Alphonse Carr, graceful can be very protective of structures, other plants and animals. Wind. You'll see some slides in a few moments about various kinds of wind damage. But definitely.
What are the ones for you?
So the ones that I would say from most susceptible to least susceptible, the big leaves and weaker canes are the factors on what kind of damage you're going to get. The wind damage will be uprooting at worst, or just plain snappage and breakage. We get a lot of broken tops on our buybacks. He's got a very heavy canopy and fairly weak column strength in the upper structure. So those will snap in very high winds. It's not usually the factor that causes the snapping. That would be the water following the winds and the freezing. But it will sometimes also uproot. The wind, basically Vivax is at the top of our do not plant list for wind damage potential.
Is it more fragile?
Yeah, it's more fragile. However, it's got other great qualities that make it way up there at the top of the list. Mainly, it grows so fast and is so easy to grow compared with others like moso. And so fast to get big. So for everyone that gets snapped and your heart broken, if you can tolerate that until June or July, and don't jump into the garden too soon to cut them out, they'll be replaced 6 times over. Because we generally see, a sextupling or so the first couple of years. It's so productive that it kind of outweighs the damage. But it's really, really painful to see the former season's bunch of shoots, in all their glory, all of a sudden, overnight, they're just like broken fingers. So.
What's your best ones?
The best ones, I would say, are moso and dulcis are at the other end of the spectrum, as in the most durable. They don't suffer any damage. I've never seen one uprooted moso or dulcis or wind broken, or I don't even think I've seen ice broken. And ices are big damage.
Just saying, coming through this last hurricane.
Yeah.
Yes, we had the world topple over, but you saw the growth up the hill and how.
It's different soil
Little
here,
leaves.
and your hurricanes are much more powerful than our winter storms.
Right.
We get a lot of winter storms, but we don't get hurricane force winds.
But even this one, I think this time
Yeah.
it came through relatively well.
And when it does do damage up there on top of the hill, they don't all blow.
Right.
They don't all get scalloped west.
Right.
There's a few, and the others, support them.
Right.
And I think it has to do with the health of the root system. Because a healthy bamboo, I think they've measured it, it's like 2 tons or 6 tons. Anyways, the force, if you drag over a 50-foot bamboo down to the ground, the force it's exerting at the roots in compression, at the base of the cane, is many tons of pressure. And it doesn't rip itself out of the ground, and it springs right back up when you let it go. So there's something else going on that causes, root-wise, and I think in the grove up the hill, and this is an ongoing discussion about how do we rejuvenate that grove, whether it's through, more thinning experiments, or fertilizer inputs, or compost inputs, or tillage, or a combination of all these things, or less traction, whatever. But yeah, I think up the grove, obviously some of the canes are extremely resilient and they don't ever show any damage, but then there are a few that give out. And maybe, like all of us, after enough strong wind or enough life, we're all going to give out at some point.
And if it's not,
Yeah.
I mean, with the tropicals, one of the things they do is they intermingle, so which is different than what we have and what we've pruned that to look like up there. Like with the clumping, the branches go together, and so once you start taking those out, you actually destabilize them, because that is what's holding them together. The other thing that holds the tropical and subtropicals together is once the plant gets past a certain age, it's depends on the species, but those rhizomes that were individual actually form a solid piece of wood. So we don't think of a bamboo as a tree, but actually that becomes, if you cut into it, you can see where the rhizomes used to be individual, but they are fused together in a solid piece of wood. So that piece of wood goes into the ground, and then it starts to crown, just like a pine tree. It pushes the bamboo up and helps it to figure out where it wants to be. Too much water, not enough water, where am I going to go? So it'll help, if you're putting it in a swampy area, they'll end up pushing themselves up out of the ground. You can get them 3-4 feet over 30 years that they'll push up over the ground, and so the top of it is up here. And that whole inside center is solid wood. And that's what's holding it, during a storm, the top is going back and forth.
Yeah, I think working up there yesterday, we only cut out a very few young poles. Most of the ones that had tipped over that were on our hit list were older canes. So their root systems may have been degrading already. It's hard to say. But it wasn't the young ones.
But you're still with that structure that's holding it.
Yeah.
That main rhizome is what's holding it in place with that matted root system.
Do we want to talk about erosion real quick? The bamboos have massive root systems. I think we've been touching on all this. The root systems go way up, can extend out 3 times the width and used effectively.
I mean, just in Costa Rica, I would say there's been a huge push in using vetiver. Vetiver was the first grass that I used in a project I did 30 years ago when I first started working with ornamental grasses. It's a tropical grass from India that's used for erosion because it's always said that it has this massive 5-foot root system. And the truth about grasses is that, this kind of deviation but it's similar, is that grasses have a massive root system if they need a massive root system. And bamboos are no different, and this is a really good example because what I find in Florida, and you probably find, is places that were are irrigated and the bamboos don't have to work that hard. They're not as resilient because they don't form this massive root system. It's the same with the grasses. Vetiver, if you plant it in a dry area, yes, you can see pictures where you have a 5-foot root system they can pull out. But when I'm planting it in the swamp, and it's pretty shallow, right? It doesn't have to go that far to create mainly it's doing that. So as far as stabilization, something like using fern leaf is much more effective in tropical and subtropical areas on inclines. And you can prune them. In Costa Rica, they're pruning them to little balls sometimes, but you can keep them. And so those inclines are much more stable with a plant like fern leaf than it is with vetiver. So,
What's going on here?
So this is from this year, hurricane. These are just, we'll show a couple of pictures from my place. This is, let's go back for a second. So we talked about water. Water is something we get during hurricanes where I get flooded. So like I'll flood, the entire farm will go under about anywhere from 4 to 6 inches from 4 to 6 days, something like that.
So this is normally no water.
Normally no water, and then that causes things like full-on failure, you know, so we'll
Uprooting clumps.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the next thing, but like there's different things that happen. But so in our last slide, what we talked about was water, wind, and erosion. So this is an example of what happens in a hurricane and water. And the next one is like, these are graceful. Graceful is one of the ones that we recommend for windbreaks because you can see, now these clumps, the way that, the other thing is like the way we plant them, and we'll talk about strategies later, but the way we plant them as far as hedgerows also help to protect the other plants in front of them, and so we'll talk about that later. And then the third one I think is one we're going to go into.
Oh, that's another angle,
complete failure here.
Ripped out.
So that's a complete failure of the plant.
What species is it?
That one is Beachiana. So Beachiana is Beachiana is a bambusa, but it acts a lot like a dendro. So I planted, for instance, a 3-gallon 3 years ago that had one little stalk in it. So it's a 3-gallon with one little stalk. The next stalk that came up was 2 inches, and the third stalk that came up was 3 inches, and the fourth stalk that came up was 4 inches. Like dendros are like that too. Like if they're a big plant, you're gonna see it right away. And when I say that sent up those 3 culms, that was within the first 6 months. So it went to 3 inches in 6 months. Like
from a what size a column?
a 3-gallon little stalk this big, right? And that's what dendros do too. In the tropics, this stuff is like, it wants to get up there and establish itself and get that sunlight, and it goes really big, really fast. That's how you know you're going to have a big bamboo. If it's not getting big fast, you don't have a big bamboo. So, and you're going to know. Within the first year, you will know what it's going to do, because it's going to do it then.
Should we look at this?
Yeah. So this is like where we talked about, this is Dain stuff.
How to plant, bamboos. How to plant for storm protection, right place.
That's just our theme.
Right plant, right place.
Yes, that's our theme.
Yeah.
But this is Dain.
Cold lower temperatures can kill leaves and then culms, and at times cause the death of the plant. This is all species specific, yes indeed. And I got some pictures of your house. Thank you for sending me a dozen photos of when you've got cold. Ice is potentially the most damaging, again, in our very temperate area, but also mild. This is the case. Due to breakage of plant tops, can be permanently alter the shape of the cane. Yeah, if the cold, will sort of, because bamboo is in warm weather, it gets very soft, and cold weather too, it just sort of freezes in its shape and sometimes never recovers. The wind here.
The overall thing was like, we're talking about hurricanes, but here in Louisiana, you have both what Dain deals with and what I deal with. I do deal with cold, but not like what you had here. But here, you're like zone. Double whammy.
Yeah, this is definitely a crossover intermediate zone, like we in the West Coast liken to, say, San Francisco area, and a little south, maybe the Watsonville area. You get a ability to grow the wonderful tropicals that you're talking about. Maybe not Beachiana, but all the the strong bambusas like the Alphonse Carr, the multiplex, as well as the temperate bamboos. So, and you do have pretty crazy ice events. This was driving down the driveway a week ago on Friday. We just had a pretty significant snow, the first of the season. We don't always get this every year. And this is Vivax. We have our power lines coming down the lane here.
This is where you are in Albany.
This is in Albany, Oregon. Yeah, hour south of Portland in the Willamette Valley. So normally our cold temperatures of the year, I figure if we're getting below 26 Fahrenheit, that's, we better start to, open up faucets and things for the night to make sure we don't get broken pipes. This storm,
you don't get any colder.
We get
a heck of a lot hotter than you do.
We get to, our lowest we've seen in 23 years of being there was 9 degrees. but
You beat that this year.
we'll frequently get to
Yeah, we beat that
20 or 19, and this is behind Judge's. Oh no, this is more of our buybacks. This is Judge. You guys, you showed me that the weather report on the TV was showing 4 degrees, which is far colder than I've ever seen in Oregon. Minnesota would get minus 30, but yeah, this is a big deal. In Abbeville, unbelievable.
10 inches, yeah.
Do we have any idea what the record was prior to that?
It wasn't any 10 inches.
19 was the coldest.
Coldest you've ever
Are you
seen.
talking about?
19 is the coldest Mike
It's
was.
100 years.
When was the coldest
So
event?
that 100-year
You want to hear
extreme may be accelerated.
Yeah, it might be.
It got down to 8 one time when I was a kid.
8.
So I don't think I got that photo in here, but a lot of these bamboos are 50, 60 feet tall, and their tops, they leaned over the top hot power line. The other lines are, not hot, they're calm lines, but the top one, a day or so later, I started to see the tops fall down. It was auto trimming on the hot line. There was these singed ends, and we would get these regular power, like brownouts, and that was, I'm sure, the bamboo tops burning through. I've sometimes.
It does.
I tried to push the bamboo off the power line once or twice and got a little bit of
yeah.
a zap.
Use a strap, FYI, because those things are full of
Yeah.
water, and what ends up happening is you're pulling it off of a hot line,
Yeah.
and that water conducts all the way down.
It's a little shocking. It's not deadly, but it tells you it's there. And a few days ago, I think it might have been, what is today? Sunday?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Wednesday. The power company guy was walking down the street. He's like, we need to trim the bamboo again. But it's really nice because out here is Highway 20, about a couple hundred feet that way, and the power truck comes by once a season or twice a season, and they top everything from their bucket truck, and it looks really cool. And they're doing me a big favor. And he's like, this was a totally new employee. He's like, is it okay if we do this? Do you want us to get in there and cut them out at the bottom? And I'm like, no. Do exactly what you've always done. It's really helping everybody. But these snow events are probably our big destructive, because the snow will melt during the day and turn into ice later that evening. And then with the 5-ax, this is Kime 5-ax, yellow and green stripe, and it just goes bang, bang, pow all night, depending on the intensity and the weight. But it's kind of exciting, heartbreaking at the same time, because somewhere you're hearing these explosions in the woods at night as they're giving out.
That's your house or mine? Is that your house?
Yeah.
Because I had something that looked just like
Did they explode? Yeah, you get explosions. So here's some from up the hill, ripped out of the ground. I think that looks like a week-old root structure to me, old cones. Anything to add?
So yeah, this is just kind of an overview of what happens to bamboos what we wanted to start with was like a little bit of like what can happen with bamboos in different situations, like we talked about.
And the cold, one more thing is the cold is, we haven't talked much about it, but I'm really impressed. At 4 degrees, what I'm seeing still alive here, there's like no damage to the moso or any of the
But the reason I keep asking about historic is that we know that grasses are highly adaptable.
Yeah.
We know that. And we know that plants can evolve in one season. And so this whole, what we're calling now land race and like adaptable to each area, we know that these bamboos, as they are evolving here on the site, are evolving to the situations that they're presented with. So if they've had cold in the past, that is the ones that are moving forward. You can call it evolution, but it is actually, there is horizontal gene transfer between bacteria and funguses that are helping to inform the DNA and actually restructuring. So it's true that these bamboos here, while they are Alphonse Carr and I have Alphonse Carr, are genetically completely different. Like they have altered by staying here.
You see
on
that
site.
in young plants in nursery. When you have thousands of plants, lined up in a greenhouse and they're grown from little tiny things, they're just not resilient to the outdoors, and they need a period of hardening off. Whether you open up the greenhouse and let the wind blow across them, but when we started our farm in 2004, I was like, I really want to grow the strongest bamboos we can. I came from Minnesota, and I started growing the bamboo in high school. We started with Dulcis and Nuda, Philostachys nuda, which was allegedly like the strongest cold hardy. And I saw -30, and they came back after -30. And the Oriole sulcata, which is another real common one, the crookstem bamboo, would also, they top kill around 0 Fahrenheit, where everything to the ground and under the snow is healthy, stays green, rhizomes push up. Problem with that is you only get a bush that grows 6 to 9 feet tall, it's all starting from 0 every year. But yeah, the plants, they do need to harden off, and if they're grown in a site, whatever site it is, in the ground, not fully protected, they're going to be tough. They may not get as big as you want them as fast, but they are, like you said, they're kind of site specific, and they're whether it's genes or just the traits they're exhibiting, obviously show that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they keep shifting. So these are some of the things that do happen to bamboos during either cold events or water events or wind events. The leaf loss, like Old Hamai is a great example of this, because this is the one that I had the most of, that I had the most problems with. But the Old Hamai strategy is she is really, really upright and super rigid, has very little flexibility back and forth. She kind of goes like this, like tick, 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 tick. Whereas like sea breeze, as a larger plant that gets 40 feet plus, at my farm I've got it 50 feet, can flop 50 feet to 50 feet to 50 feet to 50 feet. Well, Old Hamai's strategy on that is that as soon as the wind just starts a little bit blowing, she drops all her leaves. Like everything falls off. And it's like that's the only thing that keeps Old Hamai going, because even after that, she's the one that has the most damage, and I get leaners and palms down, and even have had whole plants.
Does Old Hamai have big leaves?
Big leaves.
Same with the vivax,
yeah.
The temperate.
And this is the thing that I keep talking about in Florida with the dendros. So people have this obsession with growing these big dendros for timber and things like this, but these come from areas that don't have storms, and dendros don't drop leaves. They don't drop any leaves during the storms. Even during winter, they don't drop leaves, whereas the rest of the bambusas have smaller leaves and they also drop them. This is really becoming a problem, because all that canopy is the same thing. That canopy at the top, if you've got, it's just pure wind shear, and you've got big heavy culms, big wind shear, and it's just a recipe for disaster for coming down. So that's a problem, right, with the same thing.
Can be, yeah. And again, this is one aspect of bamboo cultivation. That's a shoot damage.
And then you have, so shoot damage, same thing with Old Hamai. What I'll get is like, in the hurricanes come in the fall, typically that's when some of our dendros, and especially Old Hamai, is right about at that sweet spot at 10 to 12 feet. And at 10 to 12 feet, the culms are the most sensitive part. That's when the plant is most sensitive to damage, because it's not hardened up. And what'll happen is they'll snap. And we'll get like 4 to 5 feet snaps off, and you just walk down and there's like spears just sticking into the ground.
The tops are obviously gone, but do they leaf out below the snap?
A few of the dendros will. Old Hamai just tends to just abort everything. At that point, there's also something about like that atmospheric pressure. Like one of the hurricanes way back when I was pregnant, like 8 months pregnant, and I remember you could feel the waves coming in. It's like, and it's the same thing with the bamboos. When those babies, those new culms are full of water and they're super sensitive. Like I've even lost like new plants when they're super little, and it's not due to wind, it's like that pressure just blows the cells out. And so I've had that multiple times with hurricanes, with the atmosphere. And then twisted or broken culms, that's both of us, and then total failure. So can you talk a little bit about like when the culm breaks?
I mentioned it before. The culms, the dramatic breakage happens on our vivax. It's the biggest, fastest growing. Fortunately, it replenishes itself quickly too, but they snap, they open up, there's a big crack, a loud
Then when they snap,
they don't die, and that's the thing, is patience is a key in gardening, right? We just, every year you look forward to a bigger and better year, and it looks horrible. You know,
They
it's really
splinter,
hard. They
right?
splinter.
They don't, so bamboos, I mean, I think it's stating the
These
obvious,
combs,
they don't actually break.
are a lot of these are busted. Well, they got leaned over the power lines, and you know they're heavy tops because the surface area. These leaves of vivax are really big, and they're covered with ice, and so it drags itself down. A lot of these canes are permanently affected, you know, permanently bent, and so they really have to be cut out at some point. But if you can wait till June, till the new shoots are up, and replacing them, it's ideal. A lot of these I will clip back as much as I can and try to get them back into shape. Just leave them there. It's all how much can you tolerate, you know, the looks, because this is, you know, a farm. We're inviting visitors to come walk through the grove, so we want it to look nice. But Suya, my wife, will get out there and she'll just go to town in a week. When the weather's good, she's out there sawzalling everything down, and she's like, "Dain, don't worry about it." And I'm that guy, like all of our customers. You're like, "I love that man. I don't want to cut it." It just breaks my heart to cut it. But Suya's relentless, bless her heart. And I think both are good strategies. If you know, you can put it off till May or June. I believe that all these canes are a mass, you know, energy storage device, and they will translocate their nutrients if given time, even in their broken state, because these broken and limp tops are still obviously photosynthesizing. And I believe if you give them time, they will assist the new generation of shoots that's coming up in 60 days. By early to mid-May, the shoots are coming up. And I think a lot of, unfortunately, sadly in our case, in our soils, a lot of the ones that tip are actually the newer shoots from last season. Unlike what we see on the top of the island, those are the older canes a lot. They seem to have more rotting roots, but we have, you know, a lot of mulch on the ground, and so they're fast growing, but weak rooted. I think that's the
edges.
Yeah, and it's on the edges too. The ones inside lodge against one another because of their, you know, neighborliness, their proximity. You don't have so much of this, but at the edges they come right down and they don't go back up. Yeah, can you wait and let them be? You know, believing that it's a good idea for the next crop, or you just go in there like my wife and hack them all out. Well, both are legit. You know, what do you tolerate? What do you have the energy for? Where are your attentions going to on the farm?
And
so
one of the things that Dain talked about too, just briefly, was that like up there what we see is single columns and leaners. That's typical for me for Old Hamai, but like in storms, what I end up having is like permanently damaged in that direction. She's permanently gonna stay just like this. And so that's where, like, if you're really concerned about it and you're just going for protection, the smaller ones, because you see out here, like with these guys, the Alphonse Carr, like first of all, they're locked in place, but second of all, they're smaller, so if the wind is up higher, like my last hurricane, we had really, really intense winds that came from the north instead of the south. Never comes from the north, first time. And so those taller ones that I had on the northern end that have never gotten damaged are now permanently. And
this is where, when you know, storms make a big mess, as we talked in the beginning, it's nature's sort of, you know, forced reset button. It forces you to reconsider the shape, you know, and the planning of your farm. And this is where heavy equipment comes in, because sometimes to delete the mess, the best thing, rather than a handsaw, and every 40-foot pole is a project. You know, look how much manpower it took yesterday. You know, we did a beautiful job, but every single one had to be, you know, very carefully, meticulously cut and pulled out. If you've got a great huge stand of Bloomiana or multiplex that's gone kibitzo, it's sometimes fastest just to mulch it down, you know, or chainsaw it down and restart it, get it on the ground. Especially when you got, you know, hundreds and hundreds of plants and acres of this stuff. The faster the better. Just get it down, move on. How to plant for storm protection, right plant in
So
right
this
place.
is my place when I first started.
1998.
Well, like
Ish.
ish, you know. And then we go to the next one. This is what it looks like now.
That's pretty cool. Look at this. The edge of the garage you can see there, and you can just barely
Wow.
see here.
Yeah, so that's that same view. And so what
This is
ends
what,
up
25
happening,
years-ish?
yeah.
30 years?
And so what ends up happening is now I don't get the cold as much. I'll get a little bit in the back on the top, but this also locks itself in to protect each other. So this is just a portion of it, but basically all 5 acres
And what are
is
these
solid.
2 big plants here?
So this is ventricosa. This is that one that I said, not on my site, but on a different site, I saw under 7 feet of water for 3 weeks. And so these guys, and this is solid in the middle. This one here is chunky, old hamai. Yeah.
This is really thin. That's old hammer?
I have it thinned out, so what I like to use old hamai for is a filter, so
This is
I have it
chunky,
so
yeah.
you can,
You can
to
see
make
the-
it kind of look, I can't get anything that looks like that, but old hamai, because our clumpers are made to not see
This is
through.
it from the opposite direction, right?
Yeah,
this
so
is
this
chunky.
is towards the beginning, but you can see what I wanted to show was these all interlock with
Yeah.
each other, so these branches are part of the bamboo strategy. And
Is this
then
after a cold spell by chance?
No, it's
Okay.
just in the morning.
It's just exposure.
Yeah.
All right.
But that's the
yeah.
idea of each bamboo, and we have up there, the bamboos are actually starting to protect each other. The forest is made to protect each other and interlock together. The root systems are interlocked together, but the canopies are also interlocking together, and all of those things that's how a forest is more resilient, and that's how we can make these other pieces more resilient.
Forward here. So I think we
This is what we
Yeah.
talked about earlier with
wind
the
breaks, yeah.
microchart.
Wind breaks 6 to 10 times their
And
their-
so, if people are interested and come to me, these are about solution things. When people come to me, because to be quite honest, the big ones are really fun, but unless you have a lot of energy and you want that amount of work and you want to deal with that after a hurricane, the ones that are going to do the best are all these, the Alphonse Carr, the fern leaf, the tiny fern,
And what's going on
the
here?
graceful. Okay, so this is an example. This is actually a rare example because this goes against what I just said. This is an Okeechobee, and this is Vulgaris. And what this shows is an example. This is the side that the hurricane came on, and this is how much protection it got after. These are all kind of a variety of different bamboos, but the Vulgaris took the hit. Vulgaris is not what I would say is a strong bamboo,
Yeah.
but in this situation, no irrigation, no fertilizer. It's been sitting there doing its thing on its own, so it's a tougher form of Vulgaris. And then you see, this is the effectiveness of what a windbreak will do for what's past
That's
it.
great. That's really an interesting shot. That it took the brunt of the force.
Yeah.
Took
So
that.
the yellow leaves
Yeah.
are a result, is it?
Yeah, the damage.
The wind.
The just wind, and you figure it's not just blowing wind when it's coming, those hurricanes are blowing pelting with rain.
These leaves are shredded, right?
They're shredded.
Yeah, so if you drive down the road with a plant sticking out, you get shredded leaves.
And they'll end up dropping, but in this, yeah. And so some of the things that you can do, these are 3 things that people come to me about safety that they want to protect for. And so this is this idea of moving forward, whether it's for cold or wind or whatever we're dealing with and we're going to be, and here all of the above is food production, animals, and buildings. Those are the 3 things that we need to protect.
Yeah, there's about windbreaks protect structures, and yes, to protect animals.
So animal shelters, there's something called, and this is nothing new, but there's something called a living barn, which is essentially creating areas where animals can go into. That's not a structure. It's plants that are dense enough together that animals can get up underneath of them during a storm, and then they can be protected. But if you think about bamboos, bamboos are much more effective at this because if they can get underneath of them, that's really going to take the brunt on top, and they don't damage, you don't have falling
Is
limbs
this a
and
windscreen
things.
protecting vegetable garden?
This is, so this is sea breeze, which gets about 40, like I said, at my farm, it gets about 50 feet tall. Here, they keep it 3 feet wide and 12 feet tall, because this is in Stewart. Stewart and Okeechobee is part of the south end of what's called the Kissimmee Plains, which is this area in Florida that is just always windy. And so if they don't put a windbreak for these vegetables, then this is just on the regular, no storms, just on the regular, the vegetables will get just shredded. So then what they do is they put this into 10 acre sections, and then they have sea breeze hedged all the way around all of it, and it takes the brunt. That's fernleaf. Again, that's another one. It goes great as an understory. It's a great windbreak. It helps protect things. And then also, like, one of the things that I plan a lot for now is protection from cars, which is not storms, but cars and damaging going into there. So there's a lot of forms of damage. We're specifically for
Traffic, yes, I've heard this one. The traffic coming off the corner at 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Instead of the car going into the living room, it's better to have it go into the hedge.
This is Textilis. And you can double up too. This is hedged. Hedged works just fine. So if the plant, it doesn't seem to, like, I've never seen graceful, fernleaf, Alphonse Carr, any of what I call the smaller ones, something under 20 feet, come out of the ground because it was hedged, even though it's getting more wind shear. And hedging is a great way to maintain plants in a smaller area, because these guys like to get big. So you can hedge to like 10 feet, especially like say in a housing subdivision or something like that. I've had people send me pictures during hurricanes going, thank you so much for the bamboo, because there's a shed up against it.
If you hedge your bamboo, you're almost guaranteed to never have wind, like any kind of tippage or breakage, because you're pre-breaking the bamboo essentially by clipping off the ends, which would normally droop and catch a lot of weight. Yeah. We got some.
So these are some
AI
pictures
here.
James helped me do. This is the idea of, like, there's also protection in different ways, and how can we use that in the future to help things that we need more protection on, whether it's cars driving up.
That's nice. I think that's an AI image. That's
Yeah,
right.
James did that.
There are cars driving on, you got weird traffic patterns there. But yeah, no, that's really cool. I love it.
It's Teslas.
3 lanes going this way and
They don't
a
need,
divider.
they just figure it out. They don't
That's
need
great.
one side or the other.
No, that's really cool though. It'd be nice to see more of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, because alongside, and so here the other idea is, like, just on ornamental side, is like you can intermix these plants together, and the bamboos are protecting ornamentally the other plants that are less resilient during storms. I mean, what people come to me is like food production, food forest, backyard, chickens, animal protection, and then actual structural, protection, because a lot of times what we're protecting against is not our particular things in our space, but things coming from other spaces into our space. And that's where you want that barrier wall, right? Like sheds and vehicles and other things that slam. I've seen many pictures slam up against the bamboo on the outside that's not getting to your house or coming in your living room because this stopped it. And so utilizing those bamboos in that way is super effective. Super effective.
And that's true that a lot of times in hurricanes, the biggest damage comes from flying debris.
Exactly.
Whether that be a garbage can,
Train car.
a boat.
Outdoor lawn furniture to like bikes to trampolines. Yeah, exactly. I mean, just flying debris. And so creating those, hedgerow systems that just catch all that stuff before it comes up against
That
your
looks like
building.
the last slide.
That's our last slide.
This is nice, a fairy glen by the look of it. Is this?
That's Old Hanley. Yeah, that's at my house.
That's your property?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I realize it's just taking it to another order of magnitude.
That's the last slide. So let's open up to questions that things we missed.
Any experience in terms of storm surge? I mean, for hurricane. I mean, that's taking things to a whole different.
Yeah.
I've talked to the farmers in Japan that have, the typhoon will lift. You get a mini or a real tsunami.
Yeah.
The salt water comes up, goes across all the paddy fields.
Right.
They have to fallow them for about 2 years till they can recover production for rice, particularly. But on the edges of a lot of these paddy fields, the dikes between, there'll be bamboo growing, coming down the slopes, bambusoides in particular.
And what's been the effect?
I think it's been pretty minimal.
Yeah.
I believe the salt water we see in the coast of Oregon, you get a lot of Pseudosauce japonica, the arrow bamboo. Big heavy leaf, it gets shredded, it's a little stunted. And I think this is what salt water does, is it not just, the spray will discolor, lighten, make them more chlorotic and stunt them in general on bamboos. But they seem to all survive. I mean, Aurea, you see a lot of Aurea, Philostachys aurea, Fargesia robustas, and Pseudosauce japonica are really common in the Pacific Northwest, coastal blast areas, and they do really, really well, especially when hedged. Yeah.
Let me rephrase the question. Not so much the effect on the bamboo itself, but the effect of the bamboo in protecting from the surge.
Yeah, again, hedging the bamboo from the water surge.
Yeah.
There's not a lot it can do.
Well, it does filter. It slows down water. Bamboos just, if they're not carried away by it, if they're not uprooted and completely demolished, they're filters. Just like we were talking flying debris, washing debris, they filter out and they slow down, they make more eddies and currents that slow down moving water.
Yeah, I would say
It's like wetland
My
structure.
experience, they're not going to stop the water from rising.
Right, you're
But
a wetland.
What they will
wetland.
do is they can divert the movement.
Yeah.
If you have a storm surge coming in, moving water at 5-10 miles an hour is a powerful thing. It'll
Yeah.
raise your house.
Yes.
So if you can know in advance
that's
the
cool.
chances of storm surge, I live on the beach.
Yeah.
And
That's
I'm
really
100
cool.
yards from the beach.
Yeah.
If I plant kind of an
Yeah.
arrowhead between
That's
me and
cool,
the beach,
yeah.
it'll park the waters. My house and property will still flood, but it's going to be backwater flood.
Yeah.
It'll take the force out of the water.
Right.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's a great concept.
Yeah.
Is like utilizing it. I mean, bamboos will eventually, after the fact, then clean the land much faster than anything else, for sure.
What are some of your storm, cold snow experiences that we haven't mentioned?
Or water.
Or travel experiences and travels and chatting with other bamboo growers?
Well, I've had all those. I mean, we've had 20-year-old, 15-year-old clumps, the 75-foot tall Ventricosa, and it's all burned by the cold in 2021. And, we ended up doing what you said, is like mulching them down. They would come back, but they were so massive and there was so much trash in there. And one of the challenges some of y'all probably dealt with, and we'll see what happens here, especially with clumpers, is when those plants, when there was so much damage even to the above ground culms, like that were killed or damaged or partially frozen, they begin to regrow very quickly, right? The storm happens and the cold happens in January, February, and then very quickly, as soon as it warms up, they begin to send up new young growth. And so if you don't immediately clean them out or cut them down, then you're stuck with all this new growth inside that old stuff. And then in some cases we left the bamboo standing. And then 2 years on, all the old woody material began falling over, and whole plants just, would break and fall over,
It's a good argument for this clear cutting the alfalfa.
Oh, that's far.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
In another odd way, the flowering, which now we're all old enough to have experienced some or fewer flowering events, and they are like a natural disaster. Because you get the same exact result of a complete, mishmash or destruction of the growth, and then you got to deal with the cleanup.
We also had main clumps that were partially blown over, like we talked to. They get partially pulled out of the ground, and in many cases we found we could take a tractor and a rope and chain and pull them back up straight, and we just stand them there for a few days or keep them from falling over again they'll
Yeah.
reroot,
They will.
reestablish roots. And, gosh, the other thing this is just obvious with any plant, but we had really cold in 21 and in 22. And, we planted thousands and thousands of clumps of Bambusa textilis and multiplex all over Texas, through our clients and stuff. And 2 years of getting damaged for whatever reason, and plants just lose their vigor, and then they're just done for. They're just like toast.
There's that tipping point with
Yeah.
bamboos where it's like, if they get just too much, it's almost like, never kind of get back to where they were.
Well, and so like right now at our farm, we had cold a month ago with that big cold, and so all the foliage was lost. And typically we would start dividing a lot of those clumpers now.
Yeah.
But they're all pushing out all that new leaf growth now. But now I'm probably going to wait to do division because they don't have enough stored energy when you go to start to cut them up. They don't have enough energy to divide off because they're working so hard to push all that new foliage.
Yeah.
So that's, we've now gone 4 years in a row with these really cold events.
Yeah.
After 18 years of not really having quite anything like this, So I don't, who knows what the future holds, but it's certainly, the climate is certainly, I'm not that far from here, a similar climate to southern Louisiana, and, I've spent the last 12 years dealing with just one disaster.
That's what it feels like. It really feels like that
Snow
every
and cold,
year.
what did you have?
A mini disaster
How
or
cold
something.
was it where you all were?
Well, it didn't get nearly as cold as it got for you all
Yeah.
here, apparently, because it was in the mid-teens.
Oh,
It was just for a night.
Did you get any snow?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got snow.
That's the life of a farmer, though, really.
Okay,
Is it's
so,
like
all right,
drama.
So we do know what the future holds. It is going to be more extreme weather events.
Yeah, that's right.
Temperature
Always
and
been,
yeah.
precipitation and events itself.
That's right.
So are you all, and it was 18 years, but it's been most of years. So
Yeah.
are you guys looking ahead to see maybe bamboo from some other parts of the world?
I'm really excited
that
about that.
will be better
Yeah.
at adapting for these extreme events
yeah.
or increased precipitation.
It's always on the back of my mind is what am I going to do next? Whether I have the energy and the follow through to do it, I'm always thinking about it, especially because right now it's the Nigras in bloom. Niagara went to bloom, Bori went to bloom, Megarochico went to bloom on our farm, and now we are really left with probably a good acre or so of hennin spread out in 3 or 4 groves. And I'm looking at the imminent demise of hennin and what then the following work to remove it. But then what goes in its place? Do I just let the vivax move in from beside, or let the moso move in from another side, which is probably what I'll do. Because I really like the simplification. The farm is complicated enough, and when you start to have a collection, and invariably the collection grows and you get this botanical menagerie, and everything starts to look poorly after a while because you can't give anything enough attention. Simplifying and restructuring gives you a good, the nature forces you to reconsider the configuration of your operation, however big, whatever size, even if it's just a vegetable garden.
Okay,
Winter forces that.
However,
Yeah.
if we don't have resources of diversity,
Yep.
and as new situations come, we need to observe the
Yeah.
superpowers that are
Yeah.
not shown now, but might be shown in 5 years. I'm always looking, and I know we all are, like observing and going, what happened to that band? Like where, to see what they can tolerate.
Well, that's why it's crucial
and
to
know.
come here, to get out of your little bubble and
Yeah.
see what's working in other parts of the
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
So, clumpers, do you have any clumpers on your farm?
We've got a lot of the cold hardy, the Fargasias. We have 3 or 4 varieties of Fargesias, a ton of them.
But it's too hot for us to grow those, is
I think
Yeah.
mostly,
Yes.
yeah, mostly.
Yeah.
So my observation in my house was what came through the cold the best was the stuff I got from you old dude. Well, I got it from my cousin, but he bought it here at the auction. The temple bamboo that you had brought one year.
I've seen it over in the area.
Yeah, and that stuff is just as green as can be. And it's starting to look pretty nice. And then the moso, although the moso looked a little kind of dehydrated.
Did the edges get burned
What, of my
of the
moso?
moso?
Well, I hate to say that, but my grove is so thin,
Yeah.
it's all,
I think you can shut down
I don't have a real.
I was wondering up
Disconnect.
on the hill if some of the edges, the dieback on the edges were because of the cold.
I'm sure
I
it
had
was.
that question.
Yeah, I think it protects itself. And-
Right.
And I was gonna say where we have Textilis. Textilis came through pretty good if it had a little bit of foliage protection from a live oak or
Right.
from other bamboos.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is they're full of water, and water holds heat until it doesn't. But
Yeah, when you have a clumper like that, and you have all that decomposing old canes in the center of
Yes.
the clumper, you gotta figure that's almost
It's
a
insulation.
greenhouse in itself.
It's
And
insulation.
It's gonna keep the core of that. plant
Like when
open.
bananas, we do the same way. Bananas hold a lot of water, and so you can use bananas, even if the banana itself freezes, you can still use the water to protect the mango next to it or something else, because that water is actually creating that microclimate. And in my opinion, bamboos will do the same thing. Like they create those microclimates because of all that above ground water.
Yeah, yeah. Andy?
I realize we're probably still too much in the midst of it, but are you aware, just in terms of the climate change we've seen so far, any noticeable changes in the behavior or characteristics of any of the bamboos that you know? I was just wondering, will climate change, for instance, affect flowering cycles?
Bamboos are constantly evolving, constantly
I think when
changing with everything. And they're in like a perpetual, the thing about bamboos is that they are, like moso is a great example. So it's one of the few plants that stays in this perpetual juvenile state, this neoteny, right? Because most plants are zooming to reproduce and create another baby so that they can produce life on. But bamboos stay in this kind of their life cycle is so long, they're in this like state, and because these only like intermittently flower, they're in a neotenous state. They have some superpowers of longevity, for sure.
But every season is so unpredictable.
Yeah.
I mean, some years, like we get 5 years in a row with super cold events or super storm events, and then we get a couple years mellower seasons, and within the season, it's just totally unpredictable. Yeah.
But
They're shifting.
I think the evolving that they're talking about also, if you go in and clear cut and cut a bunch of these bamboos that have froze back, when they do come back, the ones that come back will probably be more tolerant. That's the idea, is that the bamboos, wherever they are, and it might be a slower progression, it might happen a couple times, but they'll become more resilient to the climate change.
Judith, you were going to say something.
well, you talked about how these tropicals, it get frozen and come back, how they lose their power over time. I mean, could you convince that man to go ahead and get rid of that old honey? We don't live in a zone where old honey grows.
You know,
That
it's
let it get killed year after year. Should we just settle for a nice shrub with dark green?
you bring up a really good point. I left Minnesota because I wanted to grow bamboo for reals, as they say, for reals, for reals. And it was losing its spark, just like that little ember in the fire. You blow on it too many times, it's gone. And these bamboos, like you cut them back to, or they get froze back too many times. This is what I saw with the Oreos locatas, at the Arboretum in Chanhassen, is they just started to wither, and then after a few years, they just disappeared, just like the ember in your hand.
So like the Avery Alamoso of the Barcelona in Virginia.
So what I'm saying is we all live in zonal denial, as Ian Connor likes to put it, to some degree. We're trying to grow bananas. We're trying to grow bamboosas, really where they're marginal. And if you want to grow amazing lilacs and rhubarb as big as the couch, you live in Minnesota. If you want to grow bamboosas as big as possible, you live in Kissimmee. If you want to grow, the nation's greatest moso, you go to the place and you really should follow the plant rather than make the plant follow you. I've known people that have built a 60-foot tall greenhouse to grow moso in the upland desert of eastern Oregon, which gets minus 20 degrees in the wintertime. How much do you want to fight it? Really?
I do remember, I was impressed as luxuriant as Saporito's tropical bamboos, his climates, his philostachyses weren't worth being.
And he can't grow guava worth a darn.
Yeah, right.
It's too cold.
Right.
Yeah, it's really that.
Too low.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of chances to start. Every year we have a chance to start. Every day we have a chance to start over.
But the key of the matter is
Yeah.
that if you want a cold hardy plant, take it from this Alphonse car. Don't take it from me.
Sure.
Because this plant is
It's
genetically
evolved.
different than my plant.
Yeah.
Same plant, but
Yeah.
it's totally different.
We started our farm from mosos because moso was like the end goal. I got mosos from everywhere I could on the West Coast, from north of Seattle down to south of San Francisco.
Before you came to us.
Before coming to Avery Island. And I got seedlings, I got established plants, long established, short established. I got everything. I probably got 20 plus varieties. And I went to a guy in Coquille, Oregon, who had planted 200 different seedlings. And I got to walk through and look at all of them. So yeah, seeing what's growing well, and this is why I go back to Japan a lot. One of the reasons I'm always trying to see what's growing well. I'll take soil samples back and get them. A cheap chemical assay will, for 30 or 40 bucks, will tell you all about some physical, but mostly chemical properties of the soil, which you can keep the sample indefinitely. There's no water involved. There's very little biological life happening in the soil sample. But soil samples, it's one of the most curious things about gardening, farming, because we're always looking down. We're always looking at the turned earth, not even observing and loving what's going on upstairs so much of the time as we're just concerned about the soil. We almost forget about how beautiful the rest of the plant is. But yeah, the soils are really, they're different everywhere you go. So
I forgot about the whole series of soil samples you did.
Yeah, I've done soil samples really.
So changing the subject just a little bit, but since you mentioned soils, is there a particular soil type that would cause the root structure to be weak? And I say that because, in particular, my black bamboo and my Robert Young does not live to be 3 and 4 years old.
Well, black bamboo has been in a decline for the last 15 plus years as its approach to flowering. That's not a soil issue. But I know where you're going because we've all experienced this, and we see it up on the edges of Fiddler's Green moso as well, as you get these new canes come up beautiful. They put out a few branches and then they look like they flare off and they die, completely die in one season. Beautiful, what should have been a beautiful cane. I've seen it all around the United States and Japan. But the best soils and the best mosos I've seen growing in Japan are really these gritty volcanic. When they're wet, they're slimy and clayey, just like this. Oh, there's a big rabbit out there.
He keeps running around.
Oh gosh, he's so cool. I love rabbits. I raise Flemish giants. The moso really likes a bit of a slope. It likes to have some protection from other big trees, so it can creep out then into the sun and take over. But it is a slow-growing plant because it's not in a hurry to reproduce, because it doesn't come into gregarious flower often. Instead, it just sort of, putters along and is very slow, half or quarter the rate to get big as 5X, for instance, or your 1 to 2 to 3 inch in one season bamboo. That's bonkers. But yeah, the quality of the soil makes a huge difference, and I think in Moso specifically, having grit in the soil, that sort of rounded corner grit, like almost like open drain rock, helps it. It's well known for plants, trees of all kinds, that the soil oxygen levels are crucial. Are really crucial. I don't know near enough about this, but I know that old saying, plant it low, it won't grow. Plant it high, it won't die. In the case of like fruit trees, this is really important.
Well, and I would answer, Judge, your question related. But this is a real unique place on the island here because of the uplift and good drainage and all.
Yeah.
And so my farm in East Texas is hilly and well drained. My farm on the coast is much like, New Iberia, right? Southern flat and very high water table. And the Philostachys don't love that. Rubra marginata, nuda, the water bamboo, which I don't have, I'm not sure if I have it or not. But, those do a little bit better. But most of the rest of the Philostachys, and they'll keep their, like you were talking about how bamboos act differently, and all plants do, but, they keep their rhizomes literally in the top 6 inches.
That's too wet.
Whereas in East Texas, oh man, they'll go down. They get down. So, the semi-urban area does better. Like the Sino bambusa grows beautifully even in that lowland flat soil. Subasata, of course.
Yeah, I know in Portland, again, like us, there's some really heavy clay soils, and the temple bamboo, the semi-arundinaria fastuosa, cruises at 18 inches depth. Bashania fargesii, another crazy runner, just cruises in the heaviest clay you can imagine at 12 to 24 inch depth. It's really crazy to see a bamboo do that. It's like you can't even put a shovel into that soil, and it's just sewing itself through the ground like a sewing needle.
When I was in Costa Rica, so they typically, like most of the tropical areas, they clear cut it, and then all that topsoil falls off, and you're left with this red muck clay. It's just like the stuff you get in Georgia. It's just awful. Yeah. So I try and go in guadua there, and the guadua is like, it grows a little bit, it dies. It grows a little bit, it dies. It grows. You take a piece of like, one of them was Gigantocloa adder, and you just stick like a little piece and stick it in the ground, and like 2 years later, that thing is 30 feet tall. Like it's just a monster.
Yeah,
same with vulgaris, which is why vulgaris is
really important to study soil structure. Even cursory, I'm talking about like a scientific analysis. Just hold it, put it around your hand, roll it around, put some water on it, maybe taste it. All of these things are legit. And old-fashioned ways of identifying soil type, texture, and strength and
but it's what everybody here does too, is observing. Observing.
Travel around. The more you travel around and observe healthy plants, and look at, really, it starts in the soil. I would say it starts with roots. As I tell people, the faster the roots are growing, the faster the plant is growing. The roots come first, the shoots come after. And
And there's, you've got soil, but you've got altitude, and you've got incline, all of these things.
And you've got
matter.
storms, you've got temperatures and winds and waters and all these things. But
it's a lot of.
But just go around and observe the best specimens all over the world that you can find of the plants that you're interested in. Observe the very best specimens, observe the local microclimate, climate conditions, and observe the soil, and that will tell you pretty much everything you need to know. And if it's not working in your local area, maybe it's time to move. Or at least change plants. Change plants. Yeah, don't force it.
There's 2,000 known bamboos.
That's right.
Pick a different one.
I would say, since this is going worldwide,
It is worldwide.
that we should make an appeal to our viewers
All two of
Oh,
them?
I'm not in here.
How
Okay.
many are actually watching?
Oh,
It doesn't matter, we're
it's
gonna
about
put it on
10
the
million.
internet
Oh,
anyway.
awesome.
That if you have any information or any experience of bamboos protecting your barn, your shed, your house,
Post the pictures.
any good
Yeah.
photographs or
us.
stories about that, you can send them to Shanti Pierce. Where? How?
This bamboo life.
At Bamboo Life?
Yeah.
This bamboo
This
life.
bamboo life, or Dain.
Or
Bamboo
Dain
Valley.
Sanson at Bamboo Valley?
BambooValley.com.
Or to myself at Abbeville Bamboo.
Yeah.
And we will try to continue to put together a
Yeah.
catalog and
Database.
database of
Yeah.
things that, and times and experiences where bamboo has helped to save people's lives.
Any other questions before we close this one down? I think we're good. Everybody's ready for a stand.
Another coffee.
Thank you so much.
That really puts the pressure on to be videoing
Y'all did an excellent job. Yeah, I mean, and considering, I don't know how much you rehearsed, I know that it was months.
it. It was months.
Judge, you may know the outcome of this, but do you all remember
What am I doing here?
several